For nearly 2 centuries, the Holy Land burned with the fires of war. Knights clad in steel rode beneath the cross, determined to reclaim Jerusalem for Christendom, while Muslim warriors, united under the crescent, vowed to defend their sacred lands. Behind banners of faith hid ambitions of power, wealth, and glory, as kings, sultans, and popes shaped the fate of empires. The Crusades were not just wars of religion, they were a clash of civilizations, ideologies, and dreams. From the crowded streets of medieval Europe to the deserts of the Middle East, the world stood witness to rivers of blood, shifting alliances, and extraordinary heroism. Today, we uncover the untold stories, hidden betrayals, and forgotten victories that defined one of history's most transformative conflicts. This is the epic saga of the Crusades. Chapter 1: The Call to Arms. In the year 1095, Europe stood at the brink of a new era. The Byzantine Empire, threatened by the Seljuk Turks, sent a desperate plea for help to the west. Pope Urban II seized this opportunity to unify Christendom under one cause, reclaiming the Holy Land from Muslim control. At the Council of Clermont, his fiery sermon promised eternal salvation to those who took the cross, and his words electrified the hearts of thousands. Across Europe, peasants, knights, and kings prepared for a holy mission that would change the world. The concept of a holy war struck deep into medieval minds. Pilgrims dreamed of walking where Christ once walked, and knights hungered for glory. Yet, behind the Pope's promise lay political ambition, a chance to expand the influence of Rome, control trade routes, and assert dominance over Eastern Christendom. The cross became both a symbol of faith and a banner of conquest. By the following year, entire armies began to march eastward, carrying their hopes, fears, and swords into the unknown. But the road ahead was merciless. Many had no idea of the challenges that awaited them: hunger, disease, and brutal desert heat. The promise of eternal salvation blinded many to the reality of war's horrors. Little did they know that this holy mission would soon drown in rivers of blood, and the struggle for Jerusalem would ignite nearly 2 centuries of relentless conflict. Chapter 2: The First Crusade begins. The First Crusade erupted with chaos and zeal. Tens of thousands of ordinary peasants, untrained and unequipped, joined what became known as the People's Crusade, believing divine protection would shield them. Yet, without proper leadership or supplies, they were massacred by the Seljuks long before reaching Jerusalem. Despite this early catastrophe, noble armies pressed forward, carving their way through Anatolia under constant assault. By 1097, the Crusaders laid siege to Nicaea, capturing it after fierce resistance, and then marched towards Antioch. The siege of Antioch became one of the bloodiest struggles of the Crusades, lasting months under starvation, betrayal, and constant attacks. Yet, driven by visions of divine victory, the Crusaders stormed the city and slaughtered its defenders, establishing their reputation for unmatched ferocity. Finally, in 1099, the Crusaders reached their ultimate prize, Jerusalem. After a brutal siege, they breached the walls and unleashed an unspeakable massacre upon the city's Muslim and Jewish population. For the Christian world, it was the triumph of God's will. For the Muslim world, it was an unforgivable tragedy. Jerusalem had fallen, but the war for the Holy Land had only just begun. Chapter 3: Saladin's Rise. The First Crusade's success shook the Islamic world, but disunity among Muslim rulers prevented a swift response. Decades later, a leader would rise who would change everything. Saladin Yusuf ibn Ibn, known to history as Saladin. Born in Tikrit in 1137, Saladin combined military genius with deep piety, uniting fragmented Muslim states under a single banner. To his people, he became the embodiment of honor and justice. Saladin's strategy was clear: consolidate power before confronting the Crusaders head-on. He first secured Egypt, then Damascus, and slowly brought Syria and Mesopotamia under his control. His patient diplomacy and political maneuvering allowed him to build an empire capable of resisting European advances. Unlike many warlords of his time, Saladin balanced ruthlessness with mercy, earning admiration even from his enemies. By 1187, Saladin was ready to strike. At the Battle of Hattin, his forces annihilated the Crusader army, capturing King Guy of Jerusalem and reclaiming the True Cross, a sacred Christian relic. Soon after, Jerusalem surrendered peacefully, and unlike the Crusaders of 1099, Saladin spared its inhabitants. His name became legendary, not just in the Islamic world, but across Europe, where even his foes respected his honor and chivalry. Chapter 4: Richard the Lionheart versus Saladin. The fall of Jerusalem sent shockwaves through Europe, prompting the launch of the Third Crusade. Among its leaders was Richard I of England, known as Richard the Lionheart, a warrior king whose courage and battlefield brilliance became legendary. Richard's campaign against Saladin produced some of the most iconic clashes of the Crusades. The two titans first met at the Battle of Arsuf in 1191. Richard's disciplined forces crushed Saladin's cavalry charges, securing a decisive victory that reignited Christian hopes. Yet, despite their rivalry, Richard and Saladin developed a mutual respect rare in medieval warfare. Negotiations flowed alongside battles, and both men sought a settlement that would avoid further bloodshed. In 1192, the two leaders reached a historic truce. Jerusalem would remain under Muslim control, but Christian pilgrims would be granted safe passage to the city's holy sites. The agreement marked the end of the Third Crusade, but not the end of the struggle. Both Richard and Saladin left behind legacies of courage, strategy, and honor that shaped the course of East-West relations for centuries. Chapter 5: The Knights Templar and Hospitallers. While kings and sultans clashed, powerful religious military orders emerged to defend Christian interests. The Knights Templar, founded in 1119, became guardians of pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land, growing into one of the most formidable and wealthy organizations in Europe. Clad in white mantles marked with red crosses, the Templars became symbols of discipline, faith, and ferocity in battle. Alongside them, the Knights Hospitaller focused on providing care for sick and wounded pilgrims, but soon evolved into a militant force rivaling the Templars. These knightly orders operated independently of kings and lords, answering only to the Pope. Their wealth, secrecy, and influence sparked legends, conspiracies, and eventual persecution centuries later. Within the Crusader states, these orders were the backbone of Christian power. They built massive fortresses, defended key trade routes, and launched daring raids into enemy territory. Yet, their growing influence also sowed tension among Christian leaders, as rivalry, pride, and greed often weakened the Crusader cause from within. Chapter 6: The Second Crusade and the Fall of Edessa. The fall of Edessa in 1144 shook the Christian world to its core. As the first Crusader state to collapse, it exposed the fragility of Christian control in the East. Pope Eugene III swiftly called for a Second Crusade, urging Europe's greatest monarchs to march east and reclaim lost territories. Among them were King Louis VII of France and Emperor Conrad III of Germany, whose combined forces promised a massive counteroffensive. Yet from the start, the Second Crusade was plagued by disaster. Poor planning, divided leadership, and strained relations with the Byzantine Empire undermined its strength. The Crusader armies suffered devastating defeats in Anatolia, losing thousands to hunger, disease, and ambushes. What was envisioned as a grand reconquest quickly devolved into chaos. In 1148, the Crusaders launched a desperate assault on Damascus, hoping to secure a strategic foothold. But fierce Muslim resistance and political missteps forced them into a humiliating retreat. The Second Crusade ended in failure, emboldening Muslim forces across the region and paving the way for Saladin's eventual rise to power. Chapter 7. The Tragedy of the Children's Crusade. By the early 13th century, the crusading spirit had gripped Europe so tightly that even children believed they were chosen by God to reclaim Jerusalem. In 1212, thousands of young boys and girls from France and Germany began what became known as the Children's Crusade, convinced their innocence would succeed where armies had failed. Led by visionaries like Stephen of Blois and Nicholas of Cologne, they marched toward the Mediterranean, expecting divine intervention. Many starved, fell ill, or were abandoned along the way. Worse, unscrupulous merchants exploited their faith, promising them ships to the Holy Land, but instead selling many into slavery. The tragedy shocked Europe and symbolized the growing desperation surrounding the Crusader cause. While these children never reached Jerusalem, their doomed march became one of the most haunting episodes of the Crusades, showing how deep faith and manipulation could drive humanity into unthinkable suffering. Chapter 8. The Fourth Crusade and the Sack of Constantinople. By 1202, Pope Innocent III launched the Fourth Crusade, intending to reclaim Jerusalem by first striking Muslim Egypt. However, the Crusaders' financial struggles pushed them into an unexpected alliance with the Venetians, who redirected their campaign toward Constantinople, the Christian capital of the Byzantine Empire. In 1204, what began as a holy mission descended into betrayal. The Crusaders stormed Constantinople, looting its treasures, desecrating churches, and establishing a short-lived Latin empire. The sack of Constantinople became one of the darkest chapters in Christendom, severing ties between the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches. Instead of weakening Muslim power, the Crusaders had shattered Christian unity and fatally weakened the Byzantine Empire. Their diversion away from Jerusalem exposed the growing greed and political corruption behind the Crusades, transforming them from a religious struggle into a broader contest for wealth and dominance. Chapter 9. The Decline of the Crusader States. As Muslim forces regained strength under unified leadership, the Crusader states, including Jerusalem, Antioch, Tripoli, and Edessa, became increasingly vulnerable. Isolated and under constant attack, these fragile outposts struggled to survive amid dwindling support from Europe. Internal rivalries further weakened their defenses. Crusader lords quarreled over land and power while neglecting the larger Muslim threat. Meanwhile, Saladin's successors continued consolidating control, launching relentless campaigns to push the Christians back toward the coast. By the mid-13th century, Jerusalem had changed hands multiple times, and the Crusader dream of a lasting Christian kingdom in the Holy Land was slipping away. Fortresses like Kerak and Acre became critical strongholds, but their survival depended on reinforcements that Europe increasingly failed to deliver. Chapter 10: The Rise of the Mamluks. The 13th century saw the rise of the Mamluks, an elite military caste in Egypt who overthrew their Ayyubid rulers and established a powerful new dynasty. Under leaders like Sultan Baybars, the Mamluks became the greatest defenders of Islam against the Crusaders. Baybars was both a brilliant strategist and a ruthless commander. He captured key Crusader fortresses, destroyed strongholds, and struck fear into Christian armies. His campaigns systematically dismantled Crusader power across the Levant, turning the tide decisively in favor of the Muslim world. The Mamluks also repelled the Mongols at the Battle of An-Jalut in 1260, preventing a catastrophe that could have devastated the Islamic world. By securing their dominance in the region, the Mamluks ensured that the Crusaders' foothold in the Holy Land would continue to erode rapidly. Chapter 11: The Fall of Acre. The city of Acre became the last bastion of Crusader power in the Levant. By 1291, it stood as the final stronghold of Christian forces in the Holy Land. Yet the Mamluks, led by Sultan Al-Ashraf Khalil, launched a massive siege that would decide the fate of the Crusades. The defenders fought valiantly, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Walls crumbled under relentless bombardment, and streets ran red as the city fell. Thousands of Christians were killed, and survivors were enslaved or forced into exile. With Acre's fall, the era of Crusader kingdoms effectively ended. Europe watched in shock, but lacked the unity or resources to mount another major crusade. The loss of Acre symbolized the collapse of Christian ambitions in the Holy Land and marked the beginning of a new Islamic dominance in the region. Chapter 12: Trade, Knowledge, and Cultural Exchange. Though drenched in blood, the Crusades also opened channels of trade and cultural exchange between East and West. Crusaders returned to Europe carrying spices, silk, and advanced technologies. Trade routes flourished, enriching Italian cities like Venice and Genoa. The Islamic world, in turn, influenced European science, medicine, and philosophy. Texts from Aristotle, preserved by Muslim scholars, re-entered Europe and helped ignite the Renaissance centuries later. While warfare defined the Crusades, their unintended legacy reshaped global commerce and intellectual progress. This blending of cultures also altered medieval society. From architecture to language, the Crusades left their mark on both civilizations, proving that even amid destruction, ideas and innovations could transcend the battlefield. Chapter 13: Myths versus Reality of the Crusades over centuries. The Crusades became romanticized in Europe as noble quests led by holy knights and kings, yet the reality was far more complex. Alongside acts of courage and piety came greed, betrayal, and massacres that left scars across generations. For Muslims, the Crusades symbolized foreign invasion and religious aggression, while Europeans often portrayed them as battles for freedom and faith. Neither perspective captures the full truth. The Crusades were driven as much by politics and economics as by religion. Understanding the Crusades means stripping away myths and confronting hard truths about power, ideology, and human ambition. History's lessons are rarely simple, and the Crusades remain a striking example of how faith can both inspire greatness and unleash unimaginable destruction. Chapter 14: how the Crusades shaped Europe and the Middle East. The Crusades forever altered the balance of power between Europe and the Islamic world. In Europe, centralized monarchies strengthened as kings gained wealth and prestige from crusading efforts. Feudalism weakened, and new economic opportunities emerged through trade with the East. In the Middle East, the Crusades fostered unity among Muslim factions while deepening mistrust of Western powers. The victories of leaders like Saladin and Baybars became symbols of resistance and pride, shaping Islamic identity for centuries. Even today, the memory of the Crusades lingers. Borders, alliances, and cultural attitudes forged during this period still influence politics and relations between East and West. History's echoes are long, and the Crusades remain a cornerstone of that legacy. Chapter 1-5: The Legacy of the Crusades in Modern Times. The Crusades ended centuries ago, but their impact continues to resonate. In the modern era, they are invoked in political rhetoric, religious discourse, and cultural narratives. The wars of faith between Christians and Muslims are remembered differently by each side, yet their consequences are shared. Tourism, scholarship, and archaeology have transformed how we understand the Crusades, uncovering truths lost to legend. While once celebrated as holy victories or lamented as tragic defeats, historians now view them as a crossroads of civilizations. Ultimately, the Crusades remind us of humanity's capacity for both unity and division. They reveal how faith, ambition, and survival intertwine, shaping history in ways we still feel today. The Holy Land may no longer echo with the clash of swords, but the shadows of the Crusades still stretch across our modern world. The Crusades were not just wars over sacred ground. They were a collision of worlds, ideas, and destinies. They produced heroes and villains, glory and tragedy, conquest and exchange. Their story is one of passion and betrayal, faith and survival, and its legacy lives on. If you want to uncover more forgotten chapters of history, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss our next deep dive. The past has countless secrets, and this is just the beginning.